Have you ever had a best friend so special, so unforgettable, that losing them felt like losing a part of your soul? This is the story of my best friend, an elephant named Kavi. We met when I was just a little kid. He was smaller than the other elephants, always curious, always following me around. From the moment we met, we were inseparable. We played together, splashed in the river, and ran through the fields without a care in the world. Kavi wasn't just a friend, he was family. When I was sad, he'd wrap his trunk around me as if to say, "I'm here." When I was happy, he'd trumpet with joy, sharing every moment with me. But nothing stays the same forever. One day, I overheard the adults talking. They said Kavi was getting too big, that it was time for him to leave. I didn't understand. How could they take away my best friend? I begged them to let him stay, but their minds were made up. The day he had to go, I held on to him as tightly as I could. My heart pounded, my eyes filled with tears. "Please don't take him," I cried, but there was nothing I could do. Kavi looked at me, his eyes deep and knowing. He wrapped his trunk around me one last time, and then he was gone. The days after felt empty. I listened for his trumpet, but the air was silent. I ran to our favorite places, but they weren't the same without him. Then, one day, I received a letter. Kavi was safe. He had been taken to a sanctuary where he could be free, where he could be with others like him. Years passed, but I never forgot him. And one day, I got the chance to see him again. He was bigger now, stronger. But when our eyes met, I knew he still remembered me. Some friendships never fade, no matter how far apart we are. Kavi was my best friend, and in my heart, he always will be. Have you ever had to say goodbye to someone you love? Share your story in the comments. My name is Maya, and when I was 6 years old, I met someone who would change my life forever. It happened on a quiet afternoon when I wandered a little too far from home, my bare feet brushing against the warm earth. That's when I saw him, small for an elephant, his gray skin still wrinkled and covered in patches of dried mud. His big, curious eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other in silence. I took a step forward, and he took one too. My heart pounded with excitement. I had seen elephants before, but never this close, never like this. He let out a soft huff, his tiny trunk swaying back and forth as if trying to understand me. I reached out my hand, unsure if he would back away, but instead, he gently wrapped his trunk around my fingers. It was warm, rough, and full of life. That was the moment I knew we were going to be best friends. From that day on, Kavi and I were inseparable. Every morning, as the golden sun rose over the trees, I would run outside, and there he was, waiting for me. We played by the river, splashing water at each other until we were soaked. We chased birds through the tall grass, laughing as they scattered into the sky. I would sit beside him for hours, resting my head against his side, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. He made me feel safe. He made me feel like I belonged. I would talk to him about everything, my dreams, my secrets, my fears. And even though he couldn't speak, I always felt like he understood. When I was sad, he would nuzzle my hair, wrapping his trunk around my shoulders as if he was hugging me. When I laughed, he would let out a loud trumpet, his own way of joining in. Kavi wasn't just an elephant. He was my best friend, my family, my whole world. Kavi and I did everything together. No matter where I went, he was always right behind me, his giant feet making the ground tremble just enough for me to feel it. When I ran, he ran. When I hid, he searched for me, his trunk sniffing the air until he found me. And when I laughed, he made sure to make a sound too, as if he never wanted me to feel alone. We had our own little world, a place where nothing else mattered, just me and him, lost in endless adventures. One of our favorite things to do was play in the river. The water was always cool, even on the hottest days. Kavi would wade in first, stomping around like a clumsy giant, sending ripples in every direction. I would splash him, and he would splash back, except his splashes were much bigger. He would lift his trunk and spray water all over me, soaking my clothes, making me scream and laugh at the same time. Sometimes, he would even kneel down so I could climb onto his back, and he'd walk through the shallow water, carrying me like I was the most important person in the world. But our adventures weren't just about playing. Kavi was always watching over me, always protecting me. One afternoon, as we wandered through the tall grass, we heard rustling nearby. I thought it was just the wind, but Kavi froze. His ears flared out, his body stiffened. Before I could react, he stepped in front of me, shielding me with his massive body. That's when I saw it. A wild dog, its sharp eyes locked onto us. My heart raced. I didn't know what to do, but Kavi did. He let out a deep, rumbling growl and stomped his foot hard against the ground. The dog hesitated, then turned and ran. Kavi looked back at me, his eyes calm, as if to say, "You're safe now." And I knew, as long as he was by my side, I always would be. Every day with Kavi felt like a dream, one I never wanted to wake up from. I never thought about the future, never imagined a time when things would be different. In my mind, we would always be together, forever. But life has a way of changing things when you least expect it. And soon, I would learn that even the strongest friendships can be tested by things beyond our control. It started with whispers, small, hushed conversations between the adults when they thought I wasn't listening. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Grown-ups were always talking about things that didn't matter to me. But then, one evening, I heard my father's voice, low and serious. "He's getting too big," he said. "It's not safe for him to stay here much longer." My stomach twisted. I pressed myself against the wall, listening harder. Another voice spoke, one of the elders. "He belongs in the wild, or a sanctuary. He can't stay with her forever." I felt like the air had been knocked from my chest. They were talking about Kavi, my Kavi. I wanted to run in, to scream that they were wrong, that he wasn't just some animal that needed to be sent away. He was my best friend. But my feet wouldn't move. My throat felt tight. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. Kavi was mine. He was supposed to stay with me forever. They couldn't take him away. They wouldn't. But the next morning, when I ran outside, I noticed something I had never paid attention to before. Kavi wasn't a baby anymore. He was bigger, stronger. His once small frame had grown into something powerful, something that no longer fit into the world I had created for us. And for the first time, I felt fear, not of him, but of what was coming. I tried to ignore it, to pretend everything was fine. I played with him like always, splashed in the river, ran through the fields, but there was a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. Every time I looked at him, I thought about those words. He can't stay with her forever. It wasn't fair. He belonged with me. I needed him. Then, one afternoon, I saw them, trucks rolling in, men I didn't recognize stepping out, their eyes scanning the land like they had already decided what was theirs to take. My heart pounded in my ears. I turned to Kavi, who stood beside me, unaware, his trunk lazily swinging as he watched the dust rise from the road. He didn't know. He didn't realize what was happening. But I did. And I knew I had to do something before it was too late. I ran to him, my hands gripping his rough skin as if holding on to him would stop what was coming. "We have to go, Kavi," I whispered, my voice shaking. "We have to hide." But he just stood there, calm, trusting, unaware that the world we had built together was about to shatter. The men were getting closer. I could hear their voices, the heavy crunch of boots on dry earth. Panic surged inside me. I pulled on Kavi's trunk, trying to get him to move, but he wouldn't budge. He didn't understand. He didn't know that this time, I couldn't protect him. Then I heard my father's voice. "Maya, step away." My chest tightened. I shook my head. my arms wrapping around Kavi's leg like I could somehow make him disappear if I held on tight enough. "No!" I cried. "You can't take him!" My father's face was full of something I couldn't understand. Sadness, maybe, or guilt. "It's time," he said softly. "He doesn't belong here anymore." Tears blurred my vision. I turned to Kavi, my fingers tracing the wrinkles on his skin, memorizing the feeling, the warmth of him. "Please," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Don't leave me." He let out a low rumble, his trunk brushing against my face, wiping away my tears like he always did. But this time, it didn't make things better. Nothing could. The men moved closer, speaking in voices I didn't want to hear. Then I felt it, the moment Kavi knew. His body tensed, his ears twitched, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Understanding. He let out a soft, low sound, almost like a sigh, before he slowly turned toward the waiting truck. My breath caught in my throat. "No," I choked out, reaching for him, but someone gently pulled me back. My legs gave out, and I sank to the ground, watching as Kavi took slow, heavy steps toward the truck. With every step he took, my heart broke a little more. When he reached the ramp, he stopped. For a moment, I let myself hope. Hope that he would turn around, hope that he would run back to me, that somehow this could all be undone. But then, he lifted his trunk one last time, letting out a deep, sorrowful trumpet that echoed through the trees. And then, he was gone. The dust settled, the voices faded, and I was left sitting in the empty silence, staring at the place where my best friend had once stood. The days after Kavi left felt hollow, like a part of me had been ripped away. The world moved on around me, but I felt frozen in place. Every morning I woke up expecting to see him waiting for me by the trees, his trunk swaying in that lazy, playful way. But he wasn't there. The river was quiet without him splashing beside me. The fields felt empty without the sound of his heavy footsteps following mine. I would sit by our favorite spot, listening, hoping, wishing for a sound that never came. I tried to be strong. I tried to tell myself that he was safe, that he was where he was meant to be. But the truth was, I didn't know where he was. I didn't know if he missed me the way I missed him. And that thought, more than anything, was what hurt the most. Then, one evening, a letter arrived. It had my name on it, written in careful, unfamiliar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. And as I read the words inside, the tears I had been holding back finally fell. Kavi was safe. He had been taken to a sanctuary, a place where elephants could live freely, without fear, without chains. The letter said he was adjusting well, that he had already made friends, that he spent his days roaming wide, open land. He was happy. And for the first time since he left, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. Years passed, but I never forgot him. I carried him with me in every memory, in every dream. And then, one day, I got the chance to see him again. I was older now, no longer the little girl who had once clung to his leg, begging him to stay. But as I stepped into the sanctuary, my heart raced just the same. And then, I saw him. He was bigger, stronger, but when our eyes met, I knew he still remembered me. I took a step forward, and so did he. And when he reached me, he lifted his trunk, brushing it gently against my face, just like he always had, just like he never forgot. Some friendships never fade, no matter how far apart we are. Kavi was my best friend, and in my heart, he always will be. As I stood there, feeling the warmth of Kavi's trunk against my skin, every moment we had shared came rushing back. The games in the river, the endless chases through the fields, the quiet nights when he wrapped his trunk around me to comfort me, all of it was still there, alive in both our hearts. Time had changed many things, but not this, not us. I laughed through my tears, running my hands over his rough skin, feeling the deep, steady breaths beneath my fingertips. "I missed you," I whispered. He let out a low, rumbling sound, pressing his forehead gently against mine. And in that moment, I knew he had missed me too. The caretakers watched with soft smiles, explaining how Kavi had thrived in the sanctuary. He had become a leader among the other elephants, guiding the younger ones, protecting them the way he had always protected me. Hearing that made my heart swell with pride. He wasn't just safe, he was home. And even though a part of me wished things had never changed, I knew now that this was where he was meant to be. We spent the afternoon together, walking side by side through the open fields, just like we used to. He would reach out with his trunk every now and then, nudging me playfully, making sure I was still there. And I was. I always would be. When it was time to leave, I didn't cry this time. I didn't beg him to come with me. I knew now that love didn't mean holding on too tightly. Sometimes, love meant letting go. I placed my hand on his trunk one last time, smiling up at him. "I'll see you again, Kavi," I said. He lifted his trunk, letting out a soft, happy trumpet, as if promising me the same. As I walked away, I didn't feel the same emptiness I had felt all those years ago. This time, I carried something different. A quiet peace, a knowing that no matter how far apart we were, we would always be connected. Some friendships don't fade, some bonds can't be broken, and as long as I live, I will always be the girl who once had an elephant for a best friend. If you've ever had to say goodbye to someone you love, I hope you know that love doesn't disappear. It stays in memories, in hearts, in the spaces between us. Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it.